Hey internet, and welcome back to No Meta, Just Vibes. So I have a reputation in MMOs of not progressing, not because I'm not playing the game, but because I'm switching back and forth between 5 different characters or classes at a time. I have a hard time picking a class in a game, especially if there's a lot of really fun looking options, and I tend to hyper fixate on one. So I may be playing a class and loving it, and then I see one skill or one weapon from another class, and all of a sudden it's all my brain can think about. And World of Warcraft is actually, up to now, has been an exception. It's only really in Dragonflight that I started trying other classes. I was always a Druid and Shaman guy, but I've developed an appreciation for a lot of the classes, which is good on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's made it a lot harder to actually play the game. So going into 10.2, let's see what classes that I'm really enjoying and that I could potentially be taking in as a main. Okay, first up is Augmentation Evoker. I just made a whole video on them, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. It's a hybrid support DPS class. You can buff your allies, and when you put on the buff, instead of just pushing it and letting it go, you have to do your skills correctly to keep the buff going. And I think it's a really fun playstyle. It has a lot of different AoE shapes, which I always find really fun. It's very dynamic feeling. It's pretty simple to play. My only real downside is that the aesthetics of it, while I think the skills look really cool, it's just not really my color palette, and I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's a huge factor for me. So you know, I don't know that it's going to be the main. Also, I like the Drakthir. I know a lot of people aren't like huge fans of them. I think they look really cool. The only thing that really freaks me out is their really long wing fingers. Like, they need to shorten them up. Shorten them up, give me an option, shorten them up, and the class will be improved 1,000 times. But yeah, pretty fun. Don't know that it's going to be the main, but I like it. I'm very impressed with the design of it. Okay, Druid, specifically Balanced Druid, is my WoW bread and butter. It's what got me into the game in the first place. I loved the Night Elves in Warcraft 3. That's what I always played, and I really liked the Druids there. And although shape-shifting classes aren't usually my thing, what I really like in WoW, and the Balanced Druid specifically, is that it uses astral power. Anything to do with the moon and stars is always going to be a win for me. I think it has the prettiest spell effects in the entire game for the most part. There's a lot of really cool spells it has. I do not like the Moonkin. I wasn't a fan of it when it was added. I actually switched to Shaman when that happened. Hate the Moonkin. Really like Glyph of Stars. I think that's a cool effect. I think it could use some updating, sure, but for the most part, I'm happy with it. There's a couple of issues that I have with Balanced Druid. The first is that even though I really love the Tauren and the Trolls, Night Elf is just my Druid race. That's, you know, the connection that I have to it. But almost every time I've played WoW with different friend groups, they've always played Horde, so I haven't had a lot of chances to play my Night Elf. Right now is the least difficult it's ever been to play with people of the other faction, so that is becoming less and less of an issue. I think you can even join each other's guilds now, which is cool. So really, as long as I can play a Night Elf Balanced Druid, like, that's just my sweet spot. If I'm gonna go with a Tauren or Troll, I tend to prefer Shaman a little more there. The other problem is that I don't think Balanced Druid is all that fun. It took me a long time to realize that this is one of the reasons I think that I kind of didn't stick with WoW for a lot every time I tried it. Balanced Druid has a lot of really cool spells, but I think the way that they fit together isn't amazing. You have these damage over time abilities, which are really important. They generate astral power, so you're kind of a builder spender, kind of a dot class. And then you have these eclipses, which are solar and lunar forms that empower one of your spells. It feels really weird. When they first introduced this mechanic, there was kind of a pendulum thing where you would go gradually from one attunement to the other, and I really liked that. I know that later on a lot of people kind of didn't enjoy it, but in the beginning, at least, I really liked it. I thought it was a cool idea. Now you use 2 spells of the opposite attunement to put you in the one you really want, and it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like it does much. You have some cooldowns that put you into both attunements at once, and it feels really weird. Like, I don't know what it wants me to do there. Like, it's empowering 2 spells at once, but they're both separate use cases. I don't know. It feels weird. The dots don't really feel like they contribute anything. You know, if you compare it to, say, Shadow Priest or Affliction Warlock, I feel like the damage over time abilities there really sync with the rest of the kit, and there's ways to use them to empower other abilities, or there's ways to refresh them, whereas on Druid you just kind of put them on and then you just keep putting them on. I don't know, something about them just doesn't feel very well integrated into the rest of the kit. Star Surge and Starfall are two of the coolest spells in the game. Starfall is, I think, the coolest spell in the game. They feel amazing to use, so the builder spender aspect is fine, but I think the attunement and the dots just make everything feel a little disjointed. So I would really like to see balance kind of get a little bit of a rework. I think there's a lot of good there, but something in it just gets me a little bored after a while. Also, I like that you can drop moons on people. That's cool. I know, like, that's another thing. I never know where to put the moon skills in my, like, rotation priority system, even though I've read up on it. But I love taking that talent because I love dropping moons on people. It's just satisfying. I like it. You know, Balanced Druid is always going to be very close to my heart. It's always going to be one of my major connections to the Warcraft universe. And given that we are going to the Emerald Dream in the next expansion, it is a very, very strong contender for my main, just in a thematic sense. And you know, it's been years since I was able to play a Night Elf, and I miss them a lot. I like them. So, you know, Druid is a pretty strong contender. So once Moonkin was introduced and before the Glyph of Stars became available, a couple times after that I tried out World of Warcraft, I went to a Shaman. Shaman is a really cool, again, very Warcrafty class. Like, to me, Shaman is the embodiment of like the Horde side of Warcraft. You know, using the elements and the totems, and there's just a very strong class fantasy there, and I think there's some really cool options. I have tried Elemental. I don't love Elemental. For some reason, I just can't really get into the flow of it. But I really do like Enhancement Shaman. It's a very interesting class. It's a cool kind of melee spellcaster, which I think not a lot of MMOs have right now. And one thing I like about Shaman is that I can do it as a Volpera. So normally Tauren was my, and sometimes Troll were my go-to Shaman classes. But I love the Volpera. I know they're like not a popular race. I love playing like small races. I like playing cute races, and I like Fennec Foxes. Desert Foxes are amazing and one of my favorite animals. And also the Volpera remind me of my dog, and that's just fun. So I have switched over to Volpera. Actually, for almost every other class on this list, I think Volpera is the go-to. And what I like with Enhancement specifically is that I can use 2 claw weapons, and it just feels really cool. You know, this little Desert Fox with claws and lightning and magma and stuff. Very, very cool. Very cool rotation. There's a lot of procs. There's always stuff glowing on your bar to press. It can be a little hectic, but it feels really good. The lightning visual and sound effects are some of the most satisfying in like any MMO. Like, it feels very action MMO-y almost, in a way that I think a lot of other melee abilities in the game don't necessarily do. So it is a very fun class. It's another one where when I play it a lot, I do kind of feel like I want something a little more, like I'm getting a little bored, but it is so just satisfying and easy to pick up and play that it is, you know, it's a class that I always love, and it's a class I always know that I can go to and have some fun with. I've always wanted to try the Resto Shaman, but I've never really healed in World of Warcraft, especially because I usually haven't been playing for long periods of time, and usually I'm playing with a friend group and someone else is already healing that knows the game a lot better. And, you know, because of that, I've had a lot of like healer anxiety about healing in this game. Also, I never used a mouse for a very long time. I've always had gaming laptops because I've always been in living situations that required me to, you know, use my computer in a variety of different places during the day. So I never really had a mouse a lot of the time, and I feel like mouse over is a lot more important to healing in this game than it is in others. In Final Fantasy XIV, for example, I can, you know, heal with a controller just fine. But I always loved Resto Shaman among all the healers because it uses water skills, and water is the most underrepresented element in all RPGs, and it makes me so sad because it's my favorite one. So the animations for it are amazing. I like the mechanics. You can, you know, put a couple heal over times on people. You can put down a healing rain. You can do a chain heal, which sends a river back and forth to people. You have healing totems, which you can put down and do some kind of ambient healing. Love it. Really fun. I actually, just for this video, I tried Resto Shaman for maybe the second or third time ever in a dungeon, and it actually went pretty well. You know, it's not a super difficult class to get into. It's definitely different from healing in other games that I've done, but I liked it, and I'm very curious about seeing more healing in this game, and if that's kind of a path that I want to go down, because usually in MMOs, I am a healer main. That's usually what I do, but World of Warcraft's never been one of those for me. I don't know. I think it's a really cool class. Again, love the class fantasy. I love that I can switch between enhancement and restoration, so I can, you know, choose how I want to play at the time. So Shaman, another strong choice. The last two classes that I have been playing around a lot with in Dragonflight are both ones that I never touched for a moment in the entire rest of the time I've been playing WoW on and off, which isn't that much time altogether, but it stretches back to the very beginning of the game. So Survival Hunter. I've never been a hunter guy. I like bows and range classes fine, but for whatever reason, a lot of times bow classes just don't really do it for me in MMOs. I have always liked the idea of pets and just how many of them you can get. There's a lot of variety there. But Survival Hunter is a controversial spec because they changed it a while back to be a melee hunter. It uses a spear, and the focus is more you fighting with your pet. And I love that. A lot of people don't think that a hunter should be using a bow. I personally think of spears before I think of bows for hunters just in general. Maybe not in World of Warcraft. I do sympathize with people who had a spec that they really liked that was based around like traps and stuff, and that got taken away. That I can sympathize with, but I think it's nice to have some variety there. I like Beastmaster a lot too. I think it's a very cool class fantasy and very easy to play, but I find that it's just a little boring for me. The pets don't do enough unique stuff for me to kind of make that the focus, but fighting alongside my pet, that I really like. There's a lot of cool spear strikes, there's a lot of mobility, you have a cool harpoon chain you can use to go between enemies. You have the death chakram, which, you know, I love chakrams, and that's a cool ability. The one thing I don't love about Survival Hunter is the bombs. I don't know, like it just doesn't do much for me. I'm not a huge bomb guy. I feel like the class maybe focuses a little more on that than it should. So I mostly take the abilities that kind of synergize me with my pet and buff my spear damage. I love spears. That's one of my favorite melee weapons. And World of Warcraft, strangely, doesn't have a lot of spear users like at all. It's not really a common thing. So I really like Survival Hunter. In general, being a melee in this game just isn't quite as fun for me as being a caster. But I really do like Survival Hunter. It gives a fun little gameplay change from the normal kinds of things I do. And again, works really well with Volpera. I love being a little Volpera with a spear running around hunting stuff with my buddy. It's just a lot of fun. And last but not least, the thing that I've mained for most of Dragonflight is the Shadow Priest. This is a class I never even considered playing, even when I thought about healing and maybe tried out Holy Priest in the past. I have never tried Shadow Priest, not my aesthetic, or at least it didn't used to be. A few expansions ago, this is another controversial change. They kind of clarified where Shadow Priests were getting their power from and started pushing the class into a more specific void caster kind of class fantasy. You know, they get their power from the void and the old gods, where it used to be just kind of more, generic might be the wrong word. It was just shadow magic before, right? I love the void. I love the old gods. It's some of my favorite stuff in WoW, both in terms of story and visually. I really love the dark purples and blues that they use for the void in a different way than shadow stuff, which is like not normally my thing. So a lot of people are not happy that Shadow Priest has been turned into a kind of void priest, but for me, it finally gave me a reason to check out the class. Now, there's always been one major obstacle for me in this class, and that's shadow form. I've complained about it before, but shadow form is just like too much. It is too much obfuscation of the character that I spend a lot of time building and getting gear for. And this is something that World of Warcraft does with a few specs, and other ones that I've mentioned in the list. We have Glyph of Stars, replacing Moonkin form, which even though it's not quite what I want, it's better than being a giant chicken, which is not what I'm about. Shadow form has always been. It's changed a lot. There have been like 5 different shadow forms or something, and the current one is okay, but I just don't love it. It's too dark, and there's these clouds that are around you all the time, and it makes it kind of hard to fly with it too. Like when I fly and the clouds are coming into the screen, it actually makes me like really dizzy, and it makes my eyes hurt. Now there is a Glyph of Shadows that made it less intense. But for me, it still wasn't enough. But they just changed this a while ago. Between the last time I played and now, they made Glyph of Shadows be even more subtle. So right now, Shadow form looking pretty good. It's a little subtle change, but it makes a huge difference for me in terms of like the class fantasy and just like how much I enjoy running around the world and being in combat. When it comes to their actual abilities, they have some dots that they can put on the target, they have some beams and all these different psychic attacks, and it's kind of complicated, but it all feels very cohesive and it all kind of works together. At its core, it's a builder spender. You're building insanity to use on your most powerful attack skills. You have a void form, which I absolutely love. It looks so cool. It builds up these tentacles the more you use it. You use these little void blasts. The capstones are all really fun. They all correspond to different old gods. I think it is one of the most successful uses of mechanic and class fantasy in a capstone talent. Like, it is perfect the way that worked out. My favorite one, of course, is I think it's the Idol of Cthulhu, where it generates these tentacles that'll shoot lasers at your opponents. I also have one that I don't think a lot of people take, that make kind of star explosions on your enemy when your dots are taken down. In general, there's a lot of cool like galaxy starry effects to this class. In some cases, even more than on Druid, which is kind of why it's been pushed above the Druid for me in terms of where I stand on my class ranking, because it's a lot of fun to play. It feels very well designed, even if there's some issues with it, like AoE can be kind of annoying in it. There's obviously issues that people more well-versed in the class than me can explain. But in terms of class fantasy and just moment-to-moment gameplay, it feels very rewarding. It feels like you always have something to do. And it just hits a good spot. Again, I can play it on a Volpera, although I also have enjoyed this class a lot on a Nightborn elf. But something about the Volpera I just kind of like. One of the other things that I don't love about Shadow Priest is the little apparitions, these little ghosts that shoot out when you use certain skills. I don't like those. And I know it's like one of the most popular parts of the class. A lot of people who have been longtime Shadow Priest players, like that's their main thing, and they kind of miss when they used to shoot out even more of them. I don't like them. I think they look kind of silly. Maybe if they redesigned them a little bit to look more like your void form or something, that would be cool. Otherwise, they look kind of silly, and I think the Volpera one, because it's shorter, just looks a little nicer. So that's one of the reasons that I go with Volpera on this class too. But yeah, that's Shadow Priest, another strong pick, another really cool class. Now, one of the reasons I made this video is because I was hoping that in making it, in gathering footage for all these classes and kind of going back and checking them out again, I would have a better conception of what it is that I want to play and what it is that I want to kind of take into, however long this phase of WoW for me is going to last. And I'm happy to report that I still don't know. I don't have any better idea now than I did when I started making this about what I want to play. I mean, on the one hand, Druid seems like an easy choice because we're going into the Emerald Dream. It just seems like such a slam dunk in terms of fantasy. But I want a little more from that class, and it makes me kind of bummed out. Shadow Priest, I've really enjoyed playing so far. I think it's been so fun, and just they took one of the two things that I didn't like about the class and fixed it, and that just it's a huge deal for me. Shaman, something about Shaman really gets me too. I really liked playing Resto a couple times I've played it now, and I'm thinking, maybe is that something I want to pursue more? Is it, do I want to start healing more in WoW now that I have kind of a more stable setup where I can mouse over people to heal them and stuff? And then there's the Augmentation Evoker. It's a new style of class. It is a very very desired class right now because people who play it well are able to give a lot of utility groups, and it's a class fantasy that I really enjoy. But am I really into the ground and the sand attacks more than the shadow or the stars? And then there's Hunter too, and that's also fun. But a little more simplistic, but just good old fashioned me and a spear and an alpaca taking on the world. So I guess the point of this video is to everyone who ever plays an MMO with me, I'm sorry that this is how I am, and that even putting this much thought and effort into trying to pick something, my brain just doesn't do it. I'll pick a class and then party with another class that was on my list, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, now I missed that. So basically, life is hell. MMOs are an existential crisis, and hopefully you are also enjoying Dragonflight, and let me know what classes you really enjoy, what specs you love. I've tried a little bit of everything now, which I never really did before Dragonflight, and there's a lot of really cool options in the game. So I'm curious to see what you play and why you play it. Is it the fantasy? Is it the gameplay? Is it the way it looks? Is it the race that you can do doing? I know they're kind of taking a lot of the race restrictions out as time goes on, which for gameplay I think it's really good. For lore, in some cases it doesn't match up, but also like everyone's been partying with druids for, you know, years in the story now. They can learn to be druids, right? Like it's not like a Volpera couldn't go learn to be a druid at this point. So I think ultimately that's a good thing, even if it kind of dilutes how special you feel being one of the classes that can play it. Anyway, I rambled on long enough. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Maybe it helped you see a new class that you want to try. If you liked this video, if you want to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be lovely. And hope you are all having a nice day. Bye.